Hello and welcome to API Days Paris, though online. So Paris in air quotes, but that is the origin of this event. And I'm so excited to spend the day with you here. I'm Jennifer Riggins. I'll be your tour guide on track 2 for most of the day, and then track 1 later on, and then track 3 tomorrow. But that's okay. Just find what interests you and join those tracks, and we'll guide you along. The first talk is really exciting to me because I am a tech culture storyteller. And so Aleksei is bringing together how API design is where tech culture and storytelling, of course, and the business and technical side come together. So Aleksei, why don't you share your screen? And while you're sharing your screen, just tell us, how long have you been in the API world and what's your favorite part of the community?
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you for having me here today. And yeah, I've been working with APIs, I think, since I started my career in general, because APIs at that days were not even web APIs. But I find it very exciting because APIs are ubiquitous, APIs are everywhere. And I think it's super important to be part of this community, to share the knowledge, to share all the findings, to have conversation, and to learn from each other, to learn from others what we can do. So
it is a special community, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hit play on your slides? Thank you so much. I'm really excited for your talk, and take it away. Thank you so much, Aleksei.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexei, and I am thrilled to be presenting at API Days Paris this year. I work as head of API at Adyen, a huge payments platform, and today I'll be sharing some insights on how we do API governance and design. It might be useful for somebody in a similar position or focusing on similar efforts, as well as for all developers and all other people who work on creating public-facing APIs. First of all, let me quickly introduce myself. I started my career in software engineering, then switched to technical writing, had experience working in startups and scale-ups, and now responsible for API strategy, API governance, API design, and everything else that leads to great developer experience. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Besides software engineering, I was studying linguistics, and so my background helps me find some interesting angles in how we look and design APIs as well. We all know that APIs stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's the interface part which is often overlooked, while interface enables interaction. Basically, API is a formal language that we expect our programs to use to talk to each other. Ironically, at the same time, there are always people behind these machines talking to each other. Some create this communication language, and some use it to teach their machines, their programs, to talk to your applications. And these are the examples of places where tech and culture of human beings meet each other. Having said that, it's interesting that most API design discussions nowadays are focused on API consumers. This makes total sense, and this is the first place where API design technicalities are meeting with the expectations of humans and thus their culture. It can be their language, their habits, their expectations, the product that you're creating, a lot of different things. And there are a lot of API discussions and presentations about that. However, it's the development culture of your organization, the best practices and the frameworks, the habits again, the collaboration processes that define your API design at the end of the day. And today I'll dive a bit more into that. Since we'll be looking into the Adyen use case, let me quickly introduce what we do. Adyen is a global fintech company, does payment processing, and provides other financial services. We support more than 200 different payment methods all over the world in many countries with different cultures operating globally. We've observed and still observing fantastic growth of our platform even in these challenging times. We are serving an enormous number of companies from completely different industries. Here are some examples of fantastic brands that process payments with Adyen, both e-commerce, mobile, and point of sale. And as you can imagine, API is the bread and butter of our business. We're a single platform, and this is our conscious choice. APIs make all parts of our system interconnected internally, but also enables the external parties to connect to our platform. If we look at our platform, to better understand its landscape, let's explore some numbers. Basically, we have dozens of public APIs, and this means thousands of internal services. We provide these APIs on different channels, web, mobile, terminal, and other devices. We have hundreds of thousands of API calls per minute, and these numbers can also be very different depending on the season. We have private cloud distributed across multiple regions all over the world. And to imagine the responsibility, last year we processed more than 300 billions of euro, and we're still observing exponential growth. And of course, we must be highly available, which means a lot of challenges that we have to deal with. These are the challenges related to technology that we choose and use. This is the challenges related to security choices, because it's super crucial for our business. And of course, challenges around scalability, availability, and design of your APIs. So you can see that managing such a platform can be quite complicated. And of course, managing APIs on such a platform is really difficult. Where this complexity comes from? First of all, payments never sleep. So basically, our platform should be operating all the time. And it's very challenging how you upgrade, how you keep it available. Then, of course, we started in 2006. And we have a lot of legacy, a lot of history. This is the reason why we're so successful, but this is also a lot of responsibility. How to maintain, how to evolve. You're not just deleting what you've done so far, right? You always think, okay, how you can get from this stage to a new stage. And last but not least, we have streams, self-governed, autonomous, quite independent, multidisciplinary teams of people. They own technical and business decisions, and they want to move fast. We find it very important for our company. So, as you might imagine, API management and API governance in these circumstances is a real challenge. When you think about the impact every API design decision, the initial intention might be is to do centralized governance and have all the decisions come into one place, say API governance team. But that's not going to work in the long run. As we know from Gartner research and from our experience in general and from other companies, because doing so will quickly become a bottleneck. So this is definitely not something that we want to do if we want our teams to move fast. We prefer distributed or federated API governance, which seems to be working great. But how can you then make sure that your API design meets the highest expectations of your API consumers? The key concept that we learned throughout this way is here. Any API decision is never purely technical or non-technical. These decisions are always a hybrid of both. What does it mean? It means that you need to involve multiple people and to look at every API design decision from different angles. First of all, it's about embedding API design processes, standards, and sharing knowledge across the company. And how this can merge or clash with the existing development culture that you have in your organization. If you think about culture, I like this definition. Culture is how we do things here. It's how we create new products, how we write, test, and deploy our code, what we use and when. A lot of things and processes are integrated into the organization, into the people, into your colleagues around you. So you cannot just come with a new process and say, okay, now we do things completely different way, because there are reasons, there are habits, things that is representing your culture. And luckily at Adyen, we have our way of engineering where we try to formulate the key ideas that we follow in how we develop and evolve our platform. Of course, these principles are evolving as we're evolving as an organization, but it's good that we have shared understanding that this is our approach to how we create our products, how we create our APIs. Just maybe to focus on some of them, as we can see, we expect our teams to be, in developers, to be autonomous, which means great level of ownership, both in designing solutions and implementing them. So here we see that we are all designers, architects, coders, and testers. So we always try to go that extra mile and to look at every decision that we make from that perspective. At the same time, we own when, where, and how your code goes live, which means that it's freedom and autonomy, but also sense of ownership, which we find is very important for how we create our products. And at the same time, as I mentioned before, API design decisions tend to be very complex and have big impact on your platform, on your product. Why is it so? There are several reasons for that. First of all, they require a lot of specific knowledge. So usually, it's not just the knowledge how you need to create good REST API, although it's important, or maybe GraphQL or another type of API. It's also domain knowledge. What is the terminology? What are the best practices? It's a product knowledge, understanding the use cases, how your APIs will be used. It's a language knowledge. It's knowledge also about good and bad terms from the DNI perspective, for example. And it's a lot of knowledge from different areas. So at the same time, you need to make the decisions really fast because you don't want to spend months and months on making the decision. Otherwise, you can be too late with delivering your API product to the market, and it doesn't make sense anymore. And the last but not least, definition of done for public APIs. For all the APIs that we expose, it's really important to distinguish between a moment that we are still working on a new version of API and hashing out all the details based on the feedback and reviews, versus a moment where API consumers already start integrating with these APIs. Because in this case, many more changes become much harder, and we want to make sure that we came up with the best API design before giving it to our customers. So how do you successfully launch good API design in an existing organization? Here are a few lessons that we learned, and I want to share them with you. First of all, you need to start with a group of people who are willing to dedicate their time to do API reviews and API governance effort. It can be a full-time job for somebody, but most likely you will need to find very different people with diverse experience from your organization who already have multiple hats. So in this case, it's just one of another responsibilities that they're willing and committed to. And ideally, as I mentioned, they should be representing different parts of your platform and your business. The more diverse group you have, in this case, the better API design decisions you can make. And this group, for example, in our case, can be responsible for 3 different areas. First of all, API design, ideation and feedback before the development actually starts. And doing API reviews, evaluating the use of existing APIs and come up with improvements, because APIs is not something that you just develop and forget, right? So there is always evolution happening, and there is always something that you can improve. Also, this group can be responsible for the style guide and tooling around the style guide. Style guide is important for you to implement consistency across your organization. Also, it's important how you position this API review, API governance group in your organization. In our case, these are the slogans that we are using. We are here to help, not to control you. And we are not API police at the end of the day. Yes, we have the knowledge. Yes, we have the energy. We have the time. We really want our APIs to be as fantastic as possible, but we are not API police. After you have this group of people, it's important to find a place where you have a discussion all together. Because as it can often happen, you can have multiple documents shared with each other. You can use Jira notes and some other things, Slack messages. But it's important that you gather all the discussions, all the information in one place. There are a lot of API collaboration tools nowadays. We're using Stoplight because it provides nice visual design for you, so you can easily define your APIs, still store an OpenAPI format at the same time. You can invite multiple people who don't know the OpenAPI format, who maybe don't have a lot of technical knowledge, but have a lot of domain knowledge. And with discussing this visually, you can achieve much better collaboration. You can use Stoplight or Postman or other tools that are very popular nowadays. And we include different people to sharpen our ideas using this approach. Then, of course, it's important that you write down all the decisions, but also reasoning behind them. And then you can create a style guide, maybe use an existing one and derive from it. And it's crucial here that the style guide should be in a place where it can be easily accessible to everyone in the organization. So it can be just internal wiki system or another place where everybody knows how to find it. It's also important that everyone should be able to contribute to it. Of course, there should be a group that is maintaining the style guide, but everyone should have the freedom to submit a suggestion, maybe to change something based on the impact of what you want to do. Then, of course, it's crucial that you not only explain what we should be doing to create great APIs, but also why. because this is always posing questions, and this can be also a reason for further discussion on maybe changing the decision or improving it. And then, of course, last but not least, you should constantly maintain and evolve the style guide, because it should be a living thing for everybody in the organization. Once you have a style guide, it's important that everybody is following it. At the same time, you can have 200 different rules, and nobody's going to remember all of them. So it's very easy if you can automate it, for example, with some linting tools like Spectral that works brilliantly with open API files. You can automate as many custom rules from your style guide as possible, and this will give you freedom to focus on higher decisions when you will be discussing API design with your development teams, while all the other small style guide cases can be already covered with the linting tool. As I mentioned before, we're using Open API contract for contract testing and API design. And I think this is also very crucial to have a common way of sharing the agreement on how your API design should look like. Open API in that sense seems to be very mature, supported by many tools, and we really believe in it. You can use it just for discussing your APIs and for implementing design-first approach. At the same time, you can implement much more things around it, like linting or contract testing, when, for example, you can make sure that your API is implemented exactly in the same way as was designed. And then when you go to the next stage, you can also see what's going on and if the changes are reflected in the API design or require additional discussions. Another important point here is that your APIs will be constantly evolving. Of course, there are best practices how you can add things to your API without breaking existing versions. At the same time, there are moments when you will really need to change your API and introduce a new version. And in this case, it's important that from the beginning, you already have your understanding how you will be going to do this. And this ideally should not be only your internal document. Ideally, you should have a published document and version strategy in your public documentation, so it's shared understanding between you and all the API consumers what to expect. And only by providing this framework beforehand, you will be able later to evolve your API with ease. Last but not least, culture is not everything. Of course, you need to also think about proper tooling that your developers are using. Why? Because eventually people will also follow what's easy for them and what works for them. So when you design a new API, it can happen that the framework that your developers are using is just not suitable to provide this API. So try also to invest your time to look further inside and to see how we can achieve these great APIs. This is not new knowledge. So basically, I gathered here a few quotes from different thought leaders who also saying that basically we spend much more time on doing what's easy than on doing what's right. And then it's important that we make the right thing to do is an easy thing to do internally. To summarize, here are the best practices from our side. API design, collaboration is the key. You can use tools like Stoplight, Open API, and follow the API design first or API design as soon as possible strategy. API development, you really need to evaluate the entire API design and API lifecycle and automate as much as possible. Remove bottlenecks for your developers, educate them, support them, and try to involve as many people as possible to make sure that this becomes part of your development culture in your organization. And then, of course, API consumers. I haven't talked a lot about that because there are a lot of other presentations in this regard, but it's super crucial that you're always in between. You understand what they need, you understand how they think, how they will be using your APIs, and you constantly collect feedback through different channels, as many as possible. For example, we have a developer advocacy team who is representing us and getting this feedback. And of course, I want to finish today with this nice images showing the Matryoshka doll, because this is how I also see it, API governance. It's a journey. You never know what's next. You solve one problem and then find another challenge and then go next. But it's important that when you do this, you always think about people behind your APIs. You always think about the culture side. And if you do this, you will be successful in the journey. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you very much for your patience, and I am open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Aleksei. That was very interesting. I really enjoyed the idea that any API decision is never purely technical or non-technical. I think that's a lesson beyond APIs, but for the entire technical space. There was some good talk, conversation in the chat I wanted to highlight about your use of the style guide. And Michelle said like how important it is and that she's planning to open source that as well. She is the project lead for the SAP API style guide. And she said the most important, they're getting chatting, so it's scrolling down. The most important thing is to provide naming guidelines, description guidelines with gold standard rules. She said that we also provide a review process between developers and our user assistance developers, AKA tech writers. So what I was thinking is you're talking about bringing all these people together, which is great. Like, obviously, that's my favorite side of the culture side of tech. But it can sometimes, how do you deal with conflicts? For example, you have a style guide with your company and how to build things. But then those APIs will be consumed potentially, especially with an API monetization strategy, et cetera, with external partners. So how does it meet their style guide? Or say like SAP, this is a great example because they're ginormous. So do you then conform to their style guide and their namings? Because there are different names used for things, especially as we update language that is colonialistic or really aggressive and harmful language. And then yes, we got rid of one, but then there was 20 different options. So how do you make that decision of who decides what goes into that style guide?
Yeah, I think, again, the key here is collaboration. So basically you talk to a lot of people, and internally you can have variations of your style guide depending on the maturity of API, on the requirements and everything. When we build public APIs used by many companies, we really, of course, try to focus on our own style guides. And when we build an API integration with some of the partners, of course, we need to take into account their stack because we're building together with them and also have a discussion together. Although you mentioned harmful and aggressive terminology in APIs, I think this is just inappropriate. So in this case, we should.
Well, for years, master slave was the de facto terminology in tech. So that needs to be updated, and that is essential that it be updated, and GitHub's kind of forced that on people in a very positive way. The only difference is there are like 7 or 8 alternatives.
Yes.
Principal, main, primary, secondary. There's many. So as language updates, how do we as a society and then as the API community and within a company decide which are the de facto choices, and how often are partners really affecting those choices?
Yeah, I think the most important thing here is that we are updating this, and I see wonderfully a lot of frameworks and GitHub recently, right? So they're moving towards the much better terminology. And in this case, for me, it's not the choice between replica or secondary, right? So of course it can be inconsistent, but it's okay. Actually, we can live with that. We can also reduce inconsistency over time if needed. But it's important that we take an action.
Okay. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's really good. And yeah, I would just recommend those that are watching live to pay attention to the chat, because Michelle has shared the SAP style guide, which includes an inclusive list of terms in their standard style guide and things like that. And I would recommend that everyone use that. I think this was a great talk. I think it definitely brought together a lot of the culture side of tech, which I love. And still, you can automate a lot of it. So that's where tech comes in. So thank you so much, Aleksei.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
You too. And I'll catch you all back in a minute for Lori's talk.